Chapter 4 Treason and Treachery by Felicia of Glastock. Some people would call me a traitor. I prefer the term liberator. My goal is to free the empire from tyranny, to expose the truth and let peace return to Ganvor. I know I risk much in documenting these things on paper, but my conscience will not allow me to do otherwise. Someone must shine a light on the terrible schemings I have witnessed. My name is Felicia of Glastock, only daughter of Lord Roke of Glastock, of the line of Carvanna, and I solemnly testify that this is a true and accurate account of what took place in the months of Hespin and Vaurin in the year 1286. Upon returning from Macaria at the end of the war, I discovered that my father had purchased land for me in the vicinity of Grucan Gulga. I was to live in a picturesque cottage near the village of Mulg, with 3 servants at my disposal, and an old friend of mine, Miss Canthia of Quissel, for company. Upon moving to the cottage, I received frequent invitations to dine at the tower of Prince Vorkrond. It is no secret that he had designs of marriage upon me, but I could in no wise yield my heart to such a man. I found those dinners at the tower a most insufferable experience. The prince would quite openly and unashamedly speak of his contempt for his father, his imperial excellency, and he set out all that he would do once the sceptre was passed on. He would boast of the great expansion he would oversee, enslaving the peoples of the east under the iron boot of Grochuka. He would speak most vilely of the Galamenes and Baromians, whereas I, through personal acquaintance with them, can testify that gallantry and nobility are to be found among those peoples. A number of distinguished guests were often to be found at these meals, among them General Vralin, the Duke of Caracanva, and Lord Svalda. These too could bear witness to the repulsive and repugnant utterances spoken by the prince. Invariably we were also joined at the table by Clestus, the prince's adviser, and we were waited on by 3 servants named Smibbles, Palagash and Palagosh. I record their names so that they might one day be called as witnesses to confirm all that I am recording. In the case of Clestus, however, I fear that his loyalty to the prince is without limit. Events took a more sinister turn on the 19th day of Hespin, when an unexpected visitor made a sudden appearance in the tower. He was wrapped in a dark blue cloak, with his face concealed by a wide-brimmed hat, and rain dripped from every part of him all over the carpet as he stood there in the doorway. Dramatically, he shed his cloak and pulled off his hat and held out his arms as if he were stepping out onto the stage at the theatre. I recognized him at once. I had met him during the war, when I was taken prisoner by an escaped group of Galamenes. It was the prince's chief spy, Mr. Baracus of Kendom. He now strode up to the table, made himself at home in one of the chairs, and popped a crispy battered egg into his mouth. Conversation unfolded as follows. Baracus: "Your table's up to its usual standard, I see, though I'd say this egg is just a touch overdone if you'd forced me to be critical. It's good to be back in the tower, your highness. You didn't think I'd be gone for long, did you? Pass the salmon, will you, Svalda? There's a good fellow." He always talks in this over-familiar, casual manner. Vorkrond: "I'm surprised you dare show your face here, Baracus, after the appalling failure of your mission." Baracus: "Now is that fair, your highness? I came ever so close, I did. Got right into the Queen's presence, I'll have you know. I could feel her very breath upon me. It was always a bold plan, your highness, and you can't get it right every time. And I've done what no one else in all history has ever achieved. I've got out of Khan Tiberond. That's quite a feat, don't you think, your highness? Credit where credit's due, wouldn't you say?" Clestus: "How'd you manage it, then? Did you get the others out too?" Baracus: "Alas not, my old friend, but I've promised I'll be back for them, and I'm a man of my word, am I not, your highness? It wasn't easy, I'll have you know. It tested my skills to the utmost, I can tell you. But I achieved the unachievable, stowed away on a westbound ship, and arrived at Carcanva just yesterday. You haven't got any of that oyster sauce, have you, your highness? Where's Smibbles? Still in service, is he?" Vorkrond: I suppose you imagine you can simply waltz in here and claim your old job back, do you? Barkus, I didn't know I'd lost it, your highness. You know you'll never find a better chameleon than I. I even had you fooled, didn't I, Felicia? There you were, right in amongst those unsuspecting Galameens, and you didn't have an inkling, did you? I blended in perfectly. She'll tell you, your highness. It's good to see you again, Felicia. Seen anything of Mr. Quilp lately? I always had you two down for making a match. Canthier. Mr. Quilk? Who's this Mr. Quilk? Barkus. Ah, perhaps I shouldn't have mentioned him. Do forgive me, Felicia. That was rather indiscreet of me. I'm not ashamed to admit that I had become fond of this Mr. Quilk, one of the Galameens by whom I was captured during the war. I record this annoying remark from Barkus for the sake of completeness, since I intend this to be a full and unedited account of the conversation that took place. Vorkrond. My father is furious with you, Barkus. Your shenanigans with the Queen made things ever so awkward with negotiations. I would keep a low profile if I were you. Barkus. Well, I was thinking of heading back to Tiberond with your permission. I'd like to free old Keffin and the others, and what better way than by assuming a new identity? I could go in as a young green hat. Vorkrond. We already have a spy in Tiberond. Barkus. Well, you astonish me, your highness. Why didn't he help me get out, I wonder? I could have done with some assistance. Might have got out much sooner. Vorkrond. We couldn't risk the cover being blown, could we? Your value has somewhat diminished of late. Barkus. Am I at least allowed to know his identity? Is it Frembus? Vorkrond. That information is highly confidential. I have to be very careful with spies now. My father tries to poke his nose into all my affairs. He won't let me run a single operation on my own. Your failure, Barkus, has cost me his trust. Barkus. So you're running spies on the sly now, are you? I suppose His Excellency's rather nervy about the whole espionage business, now that we're supposed to be at peace. Vorkrond. He's grown weak and soft, Barkus. He seems to have given up completely. The glory of Grochuka seems to mean nothing to him now. No more talk of expansion. No more talk of extending our borders. We should be enlarging our armies, building up our strength again, and he's reducing them. It makes my stomach churn. Barkus. So what would you do, your highness, if you were in charge? Vorkrond. I would complete what we set out to do before, and go further as well. I would conscript all able-bodied men into the army. I would commandeer all trading vessels for the fleet. I would send our troops back across the sea, seize Calm Tiberond first, then march on Barrack-Dean directly. Galamenia is weak, Baracus. Marduria is occupied elsewhere. Boromia is divided. And once we have Galamenia in our grasp, those other kingdoms will follow. I have a full plan drawn up in my study. If we hit the right targets and jettisoned outdated scruples, we could assuredly succeed. My father should never have given up when he did. He is a fool and a coward. Clastus. Careful, your highness. That is the emperor you're talking about. Vorkrond. An emperor should be strong, Clastus. Firm, tenacious, resilient. He held back in so many ways. Too many old-fashioned principles that weakened him. Baracus. It's a shame you're not on the throne, your highness. A shame His Excellency couldn't be persuaded to retire. Vorkrond. Quite. The Empire has never been so enfeebled. Smibbles.
We are ready to serve the dessert course, sir. Shall I bring a bowl for Mr. Barracus, sir?
Vorkrond. I suppose as he's here he may as well stay now, but do not mistake my acceptance of your presence here for forgiveness, Barracus. I simply judge that you may yet be of service. Barracus. I'd be delighted to be so, old friend. I've missed being out in the field, your highness, and if you're in need of spies on the quiet, then who better than I? What's for dessert today, then, Smibbles? No chance of any fudge cake, is there? Smibbles.
I'm afraid not, sir. It's coffee cake or syrup sponge.
Barracus. Syrup sponge, eh? Well, that's second best, I suppose. It's grand to be back, your highness. I've missed this tower, you know. It almost feels like home. Vorkrond. Don't start getting sentimental, Barracus. It doesn't suit you. I will talk to you further tomorrow, but I am neglecting my other guests. Do forgive me, Miss Felicia and Miss Canthia. Let us return to the discussion of the upcoming concert." I was greatly disturbed by the remarks the prince made concerning his father. To hear him speak of him with such unconcealed disdain was a very uncomfortable experience. I made up my mind that I would seek out the plan he had referred to and convey its contents to my father. This may sound like a very rash and foolhardy resolve, but I felt the well-being of the empire itself was at stake. I determined to find my way into his study that very night. As soon as the final drinks had been served, and the prince had begun dealing cards to Clestus and the Duke of Caracanva, I excused myself from the room and ventured towards the enormous marble staircase that winds its way up through all 7 floors of the tower. I had an inkling that Volcron's study was to be found on the 2nd story, for I had often seen him descend from that level. I glanced around to determine whether I was in view of any servants, then hastened up the steps as briskly as I dared. The wooden boards of the 2nd level creaked dreadfully underfoot, so I proceeded with caution, and couldn't help continually looking behind me for fear of being watched. My pulse quickened, and my heart thumped ferociously. I did not want to be absent for too long, lest suspicions be aroused. I surveyed a succession of 6 black doors, all equal in size and alike in appearance. Which one marked the entrance to the prince's lair? I tried the first one, hesitantly poking my head into the room beyond. It was a dark and dusty chamber, piled high with ancient yellow documents. Cobwebs hung from every corner of the ceiling, and a distasteful, pungent smell befouled the air. The 2nd room proved no more desirable. For some inexplicable reason, a deathly chill enveloped the place, and it was entirely empty, with the sole exception of a broken mirror in the farthermost corner. I made a hurried retreat back into the corridor. At last I met with success. Behind the 3rd door lay a large and spacious apartment draped with sumptuous purple curtains. As with all the other rooms in the tower, there were no windows, but light was provided by 3 dull red lamps set atop tall iron pillars. The centrepiece of the study was a massive oaken desk, completely bare but for an ornate golden chest sitting on the extreme left. I instinctively headed right towards it, and found to my delight that it was unlocked. A sudden wave of fear rippled through me. I was about to rifle through the private papers of the heir to the throne of Grochuka. My fingers hovered indecisively over the raft of documents staring up at me from the open casket. I imagined secret sentinels hiding behind every curtain, carefully observing my every move, ready to pounce on me as soon as I laid hands upon the contents of the chest. I envisioned shadowy servants lurking in the darkened corners, preparing to slip away silently through unseen passages and report my presence here to Volcron. Then I pulled myself together, dismissed these foolish fancies from my mind, and delved into the massive parchments of the golden box. Most of them were letters, sent to the prince from various officials and dignitaries from right across the empire. A few were accounting records relating to servants' wages and military supplies and fortress expenses. One was a sealed envelope addressed to me in the prince's own hand, and I dreaded to think what avowals and protestations of love it might contain. I flung it aside in revulsion. Then at last I came upon what I was seeking. It was a whole bundle of papers, bound together with a scarlet cord, ominously headed with the words, "Imperial Expansion to the East." I glanced over my shoulder to check that no one had crept up on me unawares, slipped off the cord, and flicked hurriedly through the pages. Everything seemed to be set out in minute detail. Precise landing points, squadron movements, troop numbers and timetables were all delineated, with maps, charts and diagrams accompanying the extensive text. It stung me to the heart, showing beyond all doubt that the prince's earlier discourse was no mere idle talk, but a settled intention. It was also discordant with the treaty of peace, so contrary to the good of the empire, so entirely antithetical to his imperial excellency's stated policy and will. Knowing how determined a man the prince can be, I trembled to think what steps he might take to realize his vision. I dared not take the papers away with me, for their absence would soon be discovered. I began to think how best I could utilize this knowledge I had obtained. Perhaps I should write a note to my father, I thought. Perhaps I should seek an audience with the Emperor himself. Or perhaps I should wait and gather more information, paying close attention to all the prince's words. My musings were cut short by the sound of a footstep on the creaking boards without. My heart jumped into my mouth. I quickly cast all the documents back into the chest, shut fast the lid, and slinked behind one of the curtains. To my joy, I felt the handle of a door behind me, turned it with painstaking slowness, lest it made any sound, and perceived in the dimness beyond a long staircase of rough, uneven stone. I glided silently onto the uppermost step, gently closed the door behind me, and made my way down in the softest manner possible. I could hear someone enter the study above me, stand still a moment in the centre of the room, or so I judged by a temporary absence of noise, and then exit onto the creaking floorboards of the passage outside. As the footsteps died away, I steeled myself to make a cautious return up the staircase. Something horrifically startling prevented me from doing so. A firm, strong hand, large and cold, clutched hold of my wrist. Terror cut through me like a knife. Who had caught me? What had be done to me? Was it Vorkrond himself, or Clestus, or Barracus? No, the hand was too immense. Its icy fingers were far too massive for anyone I knew within the tower. I bit down hard upon my lower lip, drew up courage from the depths of my soul, and turned to face my captor. I was immensely surprised to see an iron door with a small barred window, and the arm that held me stretched out between the bars. In the shadow and gloom I could not easily make out the face of whoever stood there on the other side of the aperture, but there came a voice that was vaguely familiar.
"Please, miss, have pity on me."
I shook my arm in the vain hope of freeing it from his vice-like grip, and to my delight he released me. I wondered what poor soul this was, kept prisoner in a darkened cell, appealing to me for mercy. I peered more closely through the window, and discerned two eyes full of sorrow and woe. The voice spoke again.
"It's Miss Felicia, isn't it?"
How did this wretch know my name? Where had I heard that voice before? What was he doing there, beneath the prince's study? And what did he imagine I could do for him? I was beginning to worry now that my absence from the dining hall had been too protracted, and that inquiries would be made after me. But I could not leave this mysterious captive without at least ascertaining who he was, and whether I could render any meaningful help. Fully aware of the risk I was taking, I engaged him in conversation. "That is indeed my name, sir. How is it you know it?"
"Don't you remember me, miss? We met last winter. It's me, miss, Mr. Gevins. We took your wagon in the forest."
Well did I recall this gentle giant. Of all the men who held me in their charge, Mr. Quilk excepted, he had been the most civil and benevolent. He seemed to look on me not as an enemy to be hated, or some monster to be recoiled from, but as a fellow human being to be sympathized with and pitied. It made me question the prevailing notion espoused by our empire, that Galamenes and the other peoples of the East are in need of enlightening, taming and civilizing. My experience of them presented a somewhat different picture. True, there was rudeness, abrasiveness, prejudice and disorderliness sometimes on display, but such are surely not absent from our own lands. I think of the tender-heartedness of a farmer named Algothian. I think of the bright-eyed innocence of a young man called Hectus. Even the general in command of the group seemed to show some redeeming qualities. Are the Galamenes really the savage barbarians we paint them to be? I wondered what cruel turn of events had brought Mr. Gevins back into the Empire, and what Vorkrond's design was in keeping him there in that cell. I decided to probe him. "What are you doing here, Mr. Gevins? I thought all prisoners were released at the end of the war."
"Not me, miss. I'm a special case, the princess. Everyone else was sent home as soon as the treaty was signed, all except me and Mr. Ramkarn."
"Mr. Ramkarn is here too, is he?"
"I think he's over in the fortress. I ain't seen him for weeks now. We came here together, got recaptured just before the war finished."
"And what is Vorkrond doing with you? What makes you different from everyone else?"
"He's doing all sorts of tests on me. Says he's getting me ready for something. It's horrible, miss. I never know what's coming. Every time I hear that door up there, my heart fills with dread. It's like a living nightmare, miss. Please get me out of here. I know you're good at that kind of thing. You rescued Mr. Quilp once, didn't you?
Twice, actually. Yes, I must record even this admission for the sake of unredacted accuracy. But I don't think I'm in any position to help you, I'm afraid. I'm a guest here, Mr. Gevans. I shouldn't even be here right now. I can't even promise that I'll ever be back.
Please, miss, you don't know what it's like. When I saw you coming down those stairs a moment ago and standing there in front of me, I thought I must be dreaming. I ain't had no glimmer of hope for months, miss. Don't snatch it away from me. Think of a way, miss. You must get me out of here.
Maybe I can speak to my father. I'm sure it goes against the treaty your being here. There may be something he can do about it, but I can't promise anything.
Please, miss, try everything. Try anything. You have to get me out of here.
I'd better go, Mr. Gevans. I've been away far too long as it is, but I'll do my best to come back to you again. I'll try all that I can. The forlorn and desperate look in his eyes haunted me all the rest of that night. There seemed such depths of wretchedness and woe contained within them. I was stirred to my very core. An intense compassion welled up within me. I didn't want to contemplate what horrors he might have passed through. I know that the prince has always had an insatiable appetite for violence, and takes perverse pleasure in seeing men fight to the death. Rumour has it that he had devised a programme of such combat in Gruchengalga during the war. Perhaps he was resurrecting this idea, and was putting Mr. Gevans through his paces to mould him into the toughest and most resilient of warriors. If such is the case, then where does the true barbarism lie, in the East or in the Empire? I pitied Mr. Gevans greatly, and now that Baracus was here, I dreaded to think what further sufferings would be added to the poor man's lot. The presence of a torture expert could only amplify his misery. With a heavy heart and increasing antipathy towards His Royal Highness, I sped up the stairs and stepped out circumspectly into the prince's study. The room was empty, but I would not easily be able to explain my lengthy withdrawal from the dining hall. I quickened my pace, but on leaving the apartment I collided with someone in the corridor. I yelped involuntarily. Who had caught me, prying where no sane-minded person ought ever to have ventured? A servant? Baracus? Clestus? The prince himself? You can imagine my intense relief when I glanced up and found myself looking into the familiar hazel eyes of Canthia. She immediately blurted out her surprise at finding me in such a compromising location.
"What were you doing in there, Val? Vaucron would be livid if he knew where you'd been."
I'll explain later. I daren't talk now.
"I've been looking for you everywhere, Val. You've been gone at least half an hour."
Is the prince asking after me?
"Yes. I said you probably weren't feeling well, sickening for something as like as not."
Better keep him thinking that. I'll head off back now, Canth. Cover for me, won't you? I'll explain everything at home. That night was uneasy and sleepless. I told Canthia of my disgust at the prince's manner and my intention to inform my father of his malevolent machinations. I omitted any reference to Mr. Gevans. She thought me reckless and headstrong to ferret about in Vaucron's study the way I had, and counselled me not to meddle in matters above my station. But as a faithful friend, she promised not to breathe a word of anything I had said that night to another soul. I record this to make it plain that Canthia must in no way be implicated in any of my meddling activities, as she would put it. Any guilt there may be is mine and mine alone. When we withdrew to our respective rooms, my mind was abuzz with thoughts and worries, frettings and fears. Was I foolish to involve myself in lofty matters of royalty and politics? Was I out of my mind to have ventured into the private rooms of so elevated a figure as the prince? Would alerting my father to his clandestine intentions truly do any good? Did the prince really pose as much of a danger to peace as I dreaded? What could he do, with the emperor still on the throne? How far might he go in order to realise his plans? And what about poor Gevans? Was there any way in which I could relieve him from his misery? I just couldn't erase these concerns from my head. Round and round these thoughts kept churning. Deep down,
I felt something terrible was about to break forth, and I, whatever my station, must do all that I could to prevent it.
The 20th found me once again at the tower, though this time not by invitation. Unable to expel troubled thoughts from my mind, I slunk off at sunset towards Gruchengalga with a small bag of baked goods at my side. I'd resolved to speak again to Mr. Gevins, and toyed with the idea of having another rummage through the prince's documents, in hope of finding something I could sneak away to my father. Few people resided in the tower, so I judged it would be fairly easy to escape detection, more so than the day before, when I was known to be in the building. I found the side door open as expected, for I knew that a delivery of milk and meat came at around the 2nd hour, and I slipped in when the butcher's back was turned. As I made for the staircase, a door opened to my right, and I hid myself behind a plinth. Baracus and Clestus emerged from a small chamber, and began heading for the throne room. Curiosity gripped hold of me. Was some secret council about to take place? Had I arrived at the opportune moment when dark designs were about to be unfolded in that ancient royal hall? Knowing how rash Canthier would have judged me, I impulsively dashed across to the throne room, my heart racing frenetically within. I couldn't stay there with my ear to the door, lest a passing servant should see me. I'd be safer within, I reckoned. Immense marble pillars hold up the muralled ceiling, and I could easily conceal myself behind one. I hesitated at the door, my sweating palm on the golden handle, my throat tightening with mounting anxiety. Was I mad? Had I lost all reason? I calmed myself with deep breaths, brought down the handle with painful slowness, nudged the door open a crack, and peered in. Baracus and Clestus were at the far end of the room now, one on each side of the throne. Vorkrond himself sat uneasily in the ornate golden seat, his left foot tapping restlessly on the uppermost of the 5 marble steps. He clutched a rolled-up document in his right hand, and occasionally gave it an intense squeeze, as though in vexed agitation. Palagate and Palagoche stood still and silent about 10 feet behind the throne, resembling a pair of statues, with the only sign of life being an infrequent flickering of the eyes. Thankfully, no eyes were turned towards the door, and I decided to chance an entry. With the softest of steps, I darted across to the nearest pillar and pressed myself flat, rigid and immobile against it, hardly daring to breathe. I had a clear line of sight to the throne, the table, and the dismal pool that lies in the centre of the room, but I judged that I myself would be shielded from view. Doubt began to fill my heart as to whether this was the most foolish decision of my life, but I was quickly distracted by a stirring of the water. Something was rising from its cloudy depths, something immense, something hideous. A bony crest emerged from the dark ripples, hard, gnarled and scaly. 2 eyes soon followed, cold and cruel, tinged with a pale blue light. As the rest of the head appeared, I began to discern what manner of creature it was. The long rigid snout, the gently smoking nostrils, the fearsome tooth-lined mouth. It was unmistakably a Morka, commonly known as the marine dragon, one of the fiercest and most formidable of all that deadly order. It now raised its ugly head some 7 or 8 feet out of the water, revealing its gigantic and powerful neck, deep indigo in hue and adorned with sharp spines. I shuddered involuntarily as I beheld it. How it had made its way into the tower I could not be sure. Presumably the pool in the throne room went far down beneath the ground and led to huge subterranean tunnels, far greater in size than the Crond, where this appalling monster could swim freely and undetected and make its way back to the sea, there to harass ships and swallow down sailors in dead of night, as so many tales and legends record. Vorkrond had a Morker in his service. It is a most disturbing thought. And he had evidently been invited to join in this clandestine council. From my hiding place behind the pillar, I could hear every word of what followed, as my heart pounded within. Vorkrond: What news from the sea, Herathandra? Morka: All quiet, Highness. Nothing stirs from bay to rim, from channel to atolls. Callistus. With the greatest of respect, your Royal Highness, what business does that creature have with us? Here a savage hiss issued from the Morker. I thought we were to discuss persuading the Emperor to build up our forces. Vorkrond. Herathandra is a faithful friend, Callistus. I value his counsel greatly. Callistus. The counsel of a brute beast, your Highness. I am dubious as to what wisdom such a repulsive reptile can impart. Morker. Have a care, Truefoot. With one bite I could snap you in twain. Barracus. Shall we cut to the quick, your Highness? You were talking yesterday of the, how shall I put it, the impediment that His Imperial Excellency is proving to be to the advancement of the Empire. Vorkrond. Quite so. The fight has gone from him, the zeal for imperial glory all but extinguished. It shames me to share his blood. He is unworthy of the silver sceptre, a disgrace to the throne. Callistus. Yes, but you were rather too unguarded in articulating such a view, if you'll permit me to express it. Here we may speak freely. With guests, your Highness, I counsel more caution. You know that Lord Roke is as loyal as they come. Speaking so candidly before his daughter was an ill-judged move, if you'll indulge such frankness on my part. Vorkrond. Do not worry about his daughter, Callistus. Once I have wed her, she will know where her loyalty is due. A cold ripple shot down me as he uttered these words. Barracus. So what are we to do about your father, then? I don't think he will listen to mere words, however eloquently presented. He's never been all that open to reason, has he, once he's made his mind up? He'll be deaf to your persuasions and quite immovable, I'd wager. Morker. The solution is simple. Place his neck in my jaws and your troubles are over. Vorkrond. I will not kill my own father, Herathandra. Much as I despise his new weakness and detest his placidity, yet he remains my flesh and blood. I cannot shed one drop from his veins. Morker. A pity. I have a fancy his imperial flesh would be most exquisite. Callistus. Banish such thoughts from your mind, my scaly friend. Aside from the morality of your proposal, the policy of it is most ill-judged. Few among the Grochugan lords would accept as an emperor one who had fed his own father to a pet. Morker, with a hideous hiss. Pet! You dare to apply such an epithet to my person, with your neck in such proximity to my fangs? Barracus. Shall we return to the question at hand, friends? It seems to me, your Highness, that there is only one way forward. Vorkrond. And what, pray, might that be, do tell? Barracus. What if he were to be removed from the throne without a finger of harm being laid upon his person? What if his death were to be feigned, your Highness? He is not by any stretch a young man, is he? Death from natural causes would be eminently plausible, would it not? What if he were to come here to this tower, your Highness, but were never to be seen outside of it again? What if, as far as the rest of the world is concerned, he were to die in his sleep? All it would need would be one royal doctor, handsomely paid, of course, to pronounce him deceased, and who could possibly know that the body wrapped in the regal colours of your house was not in fact that of the Emperor? A grand state funeral could be held, a moving speech from your Highness, 3 days of public mourning, a majestic send-off worthy of one who reigned over us for so long. And all the while, where would His Excellency be in reality? Here in Grukengolga, imprisoned here under our own watchful eyes, comfortably accommodated, of course, well fed and treated with decorum, but safely confined within the fortress, for the greater glory of Grochuka. It is a bold proposition, I grant, your Highness, but as long as your father remains on that throne, this empire will stagnate, decline, and wither. What do you say, your Highness? An awful silence fell upon the room. Across the prince's face an uneasy frown appeared. Callistus looked aghast at what he had heard. The Morker's face was turned away from me, but it seemed as though it were fixed upon Vorkrond with a probing stare. Palagation and Palagos remained motionless, though I was convinced they had been listening with the most intensive interest. The silence continued. I felt as though my very heartbeat would be heard across the hall. At long last, the glacial voice of His Royal Highness broke the uneasy quiet. Vorkrond, it is a good plan, Baracus. Clastus, but your Highness, what Baracus proposes is nothing short of treason. Vorkrond, shrewd policy is what I would call it, Clastus, and I am heir to the throne, am I not? What Baracus proposes is merely a somewhat earlier transfer of power than anticipated, for the greater glory of Grotuca, as Baracus puts it. Clastus, illegally, your Highness, and deceitfully, contrary to all the laws and customs of the Empire. Vorkrond, you are too rigid in your thinking, Clastus. Sometimes customs need to be modified to secure the most profitable ends, and I would advise you to shed such rigidity if you do not want to share a similar fate to my elevated father. What do you think, Herathandra? Morcar, if a more permanent removal of his person is deemed too indelicate, it seems a reasonable course of action. Clastus, but what of the risks, your Highness? How easy it would be for your pretence to be discovered. One indiscreet word from a servant, one accidental oversight on the part of a guard, and your treason, very well, I will say scheme, will be uncovered, and what will become of you then? Banishment at best, if your life itself was spared, and then what would become of the Empire? Would your sister take the throne when your father is gone? I shudder to think how the Empire would fare in her conciliatory hands. Vorkrond, we simply need to be careful, Clastus. Only the 6 of us need know of the truth, besides the doctor and perhaps 3 of the most prudently chosen guards. None of the servants need be enlightened, barring perhaps Smibbles. I believe you have hit upon the only viable way forward, Baracus. I commend you for your boldness. Archaic scruples and faint stomach must not hold back the advance of the Empire. Let us put it into action, men. Let us invite my honourable father here this very week. Great indeed was my horror as I listened to these chilling words. That the prince could contemplate such a reprehensible course of action was alarming in the extreme. Keeping such knowledge as I now had to myself was unthinkable. But with whom was I to share this information? Who would believe me? It would sound so outlandish and implausible. The conspirators now began to move. There was no possibility of my retreating. I would have to hold my nerve and keep myself glued motionless behind the pillar. What fear enveloped me as first the tall figure of Clastus, then the silent form of Baracus, passed by within mere inches of my paralysed body. If I was seen, I would certainly be seized and confined to some lonely cell, privy as I was to such dark secrets. Vorkrond remained rooted to his throne, lost in caliginous reflection. The Morcar had returned to the depths, but Palagation and Palagosh still kept their stony vigil either side of His Highness. I still could not risk making for the door. Some 20 minutes must have passed before the prince finally rose from his contemplations, though it seemed more like 20 hours as I stood there, still clinging to the marble. Even when the hall was at long last empty, I couldn't bring myself to move from my hiding place for quite some while. I was in dread that somehow or other I had failed to notice other occupants in the room, or that one of those foul traitors might be lingering just outside. Eventually I made a halting approach to the door, pulled down the handle with excruciating hesitancy, and carefully surveyed the hall beyond. As far as I could tell, it was empty, so, clean forgetting about poor Mr. Gevans, I shot out from the throne room and darted across to the side door like a rocket from a cannon. Once outside, I sped away through the night without a single backward glance, and collapsed in a heap of nervous exhaustion on the downy hearthrug of my cottage bedroom. As I related all this to Canthea that night, ever-growing consternation and astonishment became imprinted on her face. "Oh, Fal!" she exclaimed. "You're a total mad woman, you are, a mad woman! What if Vorkrond finds out, you know? What if someone saw you skulking about in the tower? What if there was a guard concealed somewhere, recording your every move? What are you like, Fal? You're out of your mind." I half wondered whether she was correct, and found that I had lost all appetite to return to the royal dwelling. However, the following morning Smibbles appeared at the door, with yet another invitation to dinner at the Tower. I felt decidedly uneasy all day as I contemplated the prospect of an evening in the company of such treasonous vipers, and under the rapacious gaze of the prince. It was with considerable trepidation that I made my way with Canthia to the lair of my repugnant admirer. General Vralin was a guest at the table that night, and could bear witness to the conversation that unfolded. Baracus: "Vralin, my old friend, it's been too long. A real pleasure to set eyes on you again." Vralin:
"I heard a rumour you were back. Not even Carn Tiberon can hold the mighty Baracus, eh?"
Baracus: "I'm keen to get back as it happens, sir. I've some comrades I'd like to get out of there." Vralin:
"Old Kiffin's there, is he not? That's very noble of you, I must say, Baracus. Didn't take you for the noble sort."
Vorkrond: "He's itching to get back to his spy games, that's the truth of it. You'd like to get back at your captors, wouldn't you? You'd get such satisfaction from being right there under their noses, none of them having an inkling who you are." Baracus: "I'm not sure I like the way you phrase it, your highness, but I can't deny it would be tremendously rewarding to go there." Vorkrond: "I've told him of my father's wariness about spies. Infuriating spinelessness." Vralin:
"You speak very boldly, your highness."
He glanced at me.
"In present company ought you not to, how shall I put it, temper how you speak of the Emperor?"
Vorkrond: "My views on my father are well known to all here. It is no secret that I abhor his present gutlessness. I know, good general, that you wish as much as I do that we could strike out again upon the east. It's only your sense of what's proper that holds you back from full candour. My father is a hindrance, Vralin, a hindrance to Grochucan glory." Vralin:
"Coming back to Mr. Baracus's aspirations, there is a little opening where your skills could prove most useful, not in Carn Tiberond, mind, but elsewhere in Galliminia."
Baracus: "You have my interest, Vralin. Tell me more." Vralin:
"I will not speak too openly in mixed company, but let us say I have a certain friend who has been operating for quite some time within the East. He has recently risen in rank and has a position of considerable influence, shall we say. Well, Mr. Baracus, he is in need of a manservant. There are only so many places a man in his position can go to, you understand. But a manservant, well, he can be much more inconspicuous, and I dare say you might even have opportunity to pay a visit to Carn Tiberond, if that is your desire, in this capacity as his servant. What do you say?"
Baracus: "It certainly appeals, my old friend." Vorkrond: "And it would get you out of here, good riddance. I have not forgiven him, Vralin, for the failure which lost me my father's trust." Vralin:
"Tremendous. I shall send word to my man."
Clastus: "Do you have many spies in Galliminia, General?" Vralin:
"I would rather not say in present company, if you don't mind, Clistus. We know His Excellency isn't keen on espionage at the present time. I hope, young Felicia, you will show due discretion in not reporting any of this to your father, close friend of the Emperor that he is."
Vorkrond: "You needn't worry about her, Vralin. You know when to hold your tongue, don't you, Felicia? It's all for the greater good, you understand, don't you? I know you believe in the great Grochucan cause." Me: "The way you speak of His Excellency discomforts me greatly, your highness. I, like my father, am loyal to the Emperor, and it troubles me to hear you talk of him the way you do." Vralin:
"Just like her mother, eh? You speak your mind, Felicia. I like that. We are all loyal to the Emperor here, aren't we? We know His Highness is too, despite his, how shall I put it, his forthright expressions from time to time. He hasn't outright forbidden espionage, I ought to make clear. He's just a little wary about their use, that's all. We're all loyal to His Excellency, isn't that right?"
Clastus: "Undoubtedly." Baracus: "Unquestionably." Vralin:
"And you are, of course, too, aren't you, your Highness?"
Vorkrond: "You insult me by suggesting I need to assert it, Vralin. Felicia knows I am loyal to the throne, fool though my father has become,
and she knows better than to go blabbing to her father about matters that do not concern her. Fralin.
Come then, let us turn to less sensitive matters. How is my friend Mr. Ramcarn doing?
Baracus. Ramcarn is here, is he? How wonderful. Fralin.
I brought him here myself. Captured him just before the end of the war. You were acquainted with him, I understand.
Baracus. Indeed, my old friend. He joined me in my escape from you. I don't suppose I could pay him a visit, could I, for old time's sake? Vorkrond. I see no harm in it. He's over in the fortress. Perhaps we should go over there before dessert is served. Will you accompany us, Felicia? Me? I'd rather not, if it's all the same to you. I'll stay here with Canthia. Vorkrond. I thought you might have liked to have seen him. You knew him for a while, did you not? Me. I have no appetite for seeing how you treat your prisoners. By rights he should have been returned to Boromir, should he not? Vorkrond, sourly. Very well, have it your own way. Smibbles, we shall return in half an hour. Make sure dessert is on the table when we do. The four men departed, leaving Canthia and I alone in a gloomy silence. I stood up and began gathering up some leftovers from the table, a bread roll, a couple of sausages, a handful of grapes. "What are you doing, Fal?" asked my companion, with an uneasy look. "I'll be back before you know it," was my response. "If the others come back before I do, you'll think of something to cover me, won't you? The least you know, the better, Canth." Before she could utter any protest, I hurried out the room and made for the stairs. Heading straight for the third door on the second story, I plunged into the prince's study with far less caution than before. I made a quick survey of the desk to see if anything of interest had been added, then slipped quietly through the door behind the curtain. At the bottom of the steps I found Mr. Gevin sleeping, and reached an arm through the window to rouse him. His look of startlement soon dissolved into unfeigned delight.
"You came back, miss. Oh, you're a pearl, miss, a real pearl."
"I've brought you some food. It's not much, I'm afraid, but it's all I could get my hands on. I don't expect the prince is giving you much to eat now, is he?" He received the offering with great joy, and assaulted the bread roll as though a meal hadn't passed his lips in a week.
"Have you thought any more about how to get me out of here? You told your father about me."
"I haven't had the chance yet, but I intend to go to him tomorrow. There's so much you need to tell him. You'll never guess what Vorkrond's planning."
"I wouldn't put anything past him. He's a monster, miss, a horrible, hideous monster."
"Well, perhaps I'd best not tell you, you being the enemy and all that. But I'll do all I can to free you, Mr. Gevins. You really shouldn't be here by rights. I'll have to be quick, though. You may be beyond even the Emperor's help before long. I'll come back as soon as I can."
"Thank you, miss. I don't think I can face much more of this. The prince is a monster, I tell you. I reckon I won't survive much longer if I don't get out of here. Don't forget me, miss."
As I turned and ascended the staircase, an iron determination took possession of my heart. Whatever the risks, whatever the consequences, I was going to steal the prince's plans. I would snatch them from the study right there and then, and carry them off immediately to my father in Glastock. Combined with my testimony, they would demonstrate beyond all doubt that His Royal Highness was not to be trusted. If only I could get clear of the tower without being seen, all would be well. I need never return to Grukengolger, nor set eyes on Vorkrond again. My father would convey this intelligence to the Emperor. The prince would be disinherited, Gevins released, and peace maintained in Ganvor. I felt a slight twinge of conscience at the thought of leaving Canthia behind without explanation. There'd be no time for that, but I had to put the interests of the Empire above everything else. I opened the golden chest, retrieved the bundle of papers, and slid out of the room, my heart hammering away with extraordinary violence. A quick survey of the passage showed that there was nobody in sight, so out I bolted, the bundle concealed under my shawl. I charged down the stairs, 2 at a time, and made straight for the side door, not even so much as glancing towards the dining hall to see whether the prince had returned. A mere matter of seconds and I was out of that deplorable tower, out of its gloom and murk, its stale air and stench of treachery. I began to run towards Molg, intending to mount Sungleam and ride that very night to my father's estate. But as I shot through the trees, I found myself suddenly clasped in a strong pincer-like grip.
"Leaving so soon, my tormentor?" said a voice that froze my heart to ice. I was ensnared in the loathsome hands of the prince, and turning, I saw a horrid gleam in those restlessly ravening eyes of his. "Why the hurry?" he continued. "I hope I haven't offended you, my incorrigible vexer. What magnificent fire in your eyes tonight, Felicia! How long will you keep me in this state of torture?" I deduced that he had no idea as yet about the stolen papers. It was evident that he had simply spotted me hastening out of the tower upon his return from the fortress. In consequence, I restrained myself from pouring out words of contempt upon him, and repressed the fire of rage that was blazing fiercely inside me. "Let me be, your Royal Highness," I said to him, in as calm a voice as I could possibly muster. "I was restless, waiting for you all to get back, and simply came out for some air." "Then I am not so soon to be deprived of your company. Do you often run with such ferocious pace, my perplexing beauty? What spirit you have!" "Please desist from talking to me in that way, your Highness, and please take your hands from my wrists." "You are quite right." He released one hand. "I am too hasty by half. We are not yet betrothed." He freed the other hand. "But how long will you prolong my agony? I am an impatient man, Felicia. Come back with me now to the tower, and I will say no more about it." "I will join you in a moment. I find the air in your tower somewhat stifling at times. Why do you not have windows, your Highness?" "Windows invite prying, Felicia. But perhaps when we are married— very well then, if we are married— I could be persuaded to make many alterations to our home. I think your powers of persuasion could be very considerable over me, my delightful infuriator. Very well, Felicia, have it your way. Dessert will be soon, though. Do not linger here long." He turned and made just one stride away from me, when suddenly some misgiving seemed to strike him and stopped him abruptly. Turning dreadful eyes towards me, which felt like they would bore right into my soul, he gave a slight grimace and opened his mouth. "Felicia," he said in a slow, grave, and ominous voice, "what is it that you carry under your shawl?" However could I answer such a question? My heart vaulted into my throat. I could not tell him the truth. It would seal my doom. I could not tell him a lie. I could think of none, and I knew that my voice would betray me. I swallowed hard and blurted out an evasion. "Some reading, your Highness. It's just a few papers." "Let me see. Come, Felicia, don't be coy. What is it that you are reading? Is it poetry? A little fiction? Some work of your own sweet hand, perhaps? Let me see." "I'd rather not, your Highness. Please let me be." But the prince would not be deterred. A violent flash came into his eyes, and he sprang forward like a serpent and wrenched the bundle from my grasp. As he examined the front page, a whole series of expressions flickered across his face, betraying shock, panic, incredulity, anger, hurt, and bewilderment. His upper lip curled horribly. He gave a fierce snort, and his face began to twitch with rage. He seemed like a smoking mountain ready to burst into flame and send forth its scalding rivers. All the while his eyes had been fixed downward, intent on the paper that revealed my betrayal. Now at last they were lifted and blazed with white-hot wrath. I could not endure his gaze and dropped my eyes to the ground. The silence was overwhelming. I judged that he was wrestling hard with his emotions and seeking to master them before opening his mouth and addressing me. At length he spoke, ejecting a single word in a pained and almost croaking voice, as though it had required a supreme effort to get the syllable out of his throat. "Why?" I gave no response. I couldn't. My tongue was inert, my body numb, my feet rooted to the ground. "Why?" he repeated in a clearer, louder, angrier tone. "Why would you betray me so? You were taking this to show others, were you not? How could you, Felicia? I have loved you so vigorously. I have—
This wound's deep, my treacherous tormentor. You have thrust a knife clean through my heart. Why? 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 With these last exclamations, he seized hold of me and began pulling me away towards the tower. I had no spirit to resist and wrestle free. I knew I was caught and had no chance of escape. He led me through to the dining hall and presented me to the company within, as though I were a captured criminal or an uncovered spy. "This," he boomed in a thundering voice, "this that you see before you is unmasked as a cold-blooded reptile. Behold, a wily and deceptive cobra. She has slithered into my confidence only to sell secrets to her conspirators, no doubt embellished with much falsehood. See what she took from my private chambers. Palagaish, Palagaush, lock her away, take her over the wall, watch her carefully. She is not to be trusted. Beautiful she may be, but that hides a sly and slippery soul. Away with her!" And so it was that I came to be confined in the dreadful dungeons of Gruk and Golga. Not in the wooden huts where prisoners had been housed during the war, but deep underground I found myself, at the foot of a winding staircase in a cold, wet, dreary cell. There is a small grate far above me near the roof, the only source of light for my chamber. A low table with a basin, a cup, paper and a bucket provides the only furniture. Scratch marks adorn the damp stone walls. I wonder how many miserable souls have sat in this dismal cavity, shut off from the brightness of the sun, the beauty of the world, and the warmth of human company. How long will I be kept here? What will be said to my father? What are Vorkron's intentions? I had been in the cell but an hour when I was startled by the sound of another voice. No one had descended the staircase. No one had remained to guard me despite the prince's instructions. I reasoned that it must have come from an adjacent cell. "Be not fearing," said the voice, a voice not entirely unfamiliar. "They will be feeding you and letting you wash once a day, but there will be no fresh air nor comfortable bed, I must tell you. How are you coming to be here?" "Who are you? What is your name?" "My name is Ramkhan Zebaniah, and I am Baromian. More than that I cannot tell you." "Mr. Ramkhan, it is I, Felicia. Mr. Gevins said you were here." "You have spoken to Gevins? I have not seen him for many days. I thought he was gone." "No, he's inside the tower. I think Vorkron may be getting him ready for something. I dread to think what." "I am grieved that you are here, Miss Felicia. You must have been crossing the prince in some way, no? He is only bringing a select few down into this place."
"Is there anyone else here?"
"Not at present, I believe, unless they are being quiet as the grave. One thing you will be finding here, Felicia: endless peace. There is nothing that happens here." Grim though this prospect seems, I have drawn consolation from the fact that I will at least have this noble Baromian to talk to. I recall him to be of a somewhat taciturn disposition, but surely in the bleakness of this imprisonment he will yield at least a little conversation to pass the time. It was not to be for long, though, that we two were the only inhabitants of the place. The following day a third prisoner was brought down the spiral staircase, in the company of Baracus and Clestus. His face was hooded and veiled, but on reaching the lowermost step, Baracus removed them, and I gasped in horror as I beheld a familiar countenance. The deep grey eyes, the aquiline nose, and the frowning mouth encircled by a ragged white beard were unmistakable. Vorkron's plan had evidently worked. The emperor was in his clutches, and all the world would think him dead. The prince, I now presume, has taken the throne, and another war will soon begin. Baracus: "I hope you won't find it too uncomfortable here, Your Excellency. It's all strictly necessary, I'm sure you understand. All for the good of the Empire." Morbrand: "You cannot keep me here forever, Baracus. The truth will come out in the end, and I'm surprised at you, Clestus. I didn't think you'd be party to something like this." Clestus: "I'm just following orders, Your Excellency. I submit to the prince in all things, and you will be treated well while you are here." Baracus: You'll have company as well, Excellency. Yonder is Roke's young daughter, Felicia of Glastock. She was going to be ratting on His Highness, so you've a loyal subject there to talk to. And next door along there's a Mr. Ramcarn from Boromir. Perhaps a bit less of a supporter, it must be said. He's been trying to kill poor Vralin. Morbrand. This is a grave mistake, Barracus. A grave mistake indeed. My daughter will see through this charade. She will want to see my body, won't she? Won't take no for an answer. Vorkron's scheme will entirely unravel, as they always do.
Barracus.
Well, I can't stand around chatting all day, Your Excellency. I've an important new mission to be getting on with. I'm back off to Galamenia, would you believe? It's goodbye to Barracus, and hello to Hydrongulus, trusty manservant to a general. I'll bring back good news, Excellency. We'll conquer the East, I am sure.
This, then, is a full and faithful account of my uncovering of Vorkron's plot, from the return of Barracus to Grucungolga to the incarceration of His Imperial Excellency just a few feet away from me. I do not know whether this record will ever reach the hands of faithful men who can bring to account His Royal Highness. I do not know how I can release it to the outside world. But I write it in the hope that it might one day be used in evidence against the Emperor's son. Few are the souls that know the full extent of his wickedness. These carefully weighed words testify that I am one of them.